Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to our cozy little corner of the internet. I'm Pen. This is part 4, chapters 10 and 11 of You're Not Like Them by Luffy Gear 5. Let's start. Chapter 10. Atsushi pulled his eyes open. His body ached, a sharp pain lacing through his head. There was a stickiness to the side of his head, the metallic stench of blood filling the air. He grimaced, pushing himself upright as he took it into place. Atsushi was sat on a rough concrete floor, the material scratching at his palms. He took in the dark and bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling, just lighting the space. Pipes ran along the walls and ceiling, clanking. Pipes ran along the walls and ceiling, clanking randomly with their contents. Odd cupboards and boxes filled the room, a staircase to his left leading to a door. A damp, musty smell lingered around him. Must be some kind of basement. A sudden sound of footsteps reached his ears. Atsushi tense, looking to the noise. A young man wandered up to him, a smile on his lips. He had black hair and an angular face. His eyes were slanted and they were also dark. His lips were in a thin red line across his face. He looked him over. Nakajima Atsushi? Atsushi nodded, finding it hard to get his arms to transform with his ability. Why did I have to get ill now of all times? I was hoping it was you. The man smiled, sitting on the ground beside him, gesturing to the space. I'm sorry this isn't a very pleasant... I'm sorry it's not a pleasant stay. Who are you? Atsushi interrupted. The man frowned before the smile returned. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sasaki Dai. I hope we can be friends. He held out his hand. Friends? Atsushi stared at him cautiously, returning the handshake. Atsushi, can I tell you a story now that we're friends? Carefully leaning back against the wall behind him, Atsushi nodded, still trying to will his ability into action. Of course. Sasaki nodded. Thank you. He shifted forward, arms resting on his knees. How should I start this? I guess how every story starts. He shrugs. Once upon a time, there was a young boy, an orphan, who left to an orphanage by his parents who didn't want him anymore. Atsushi kept a frown on his face. Sounds like me. Sasaki continued. This orphan was taken in by the headmaster, promised love and care, but the little boy was lied to, you see. He was small and weak, an easy target to the other children. Atsushi felt his stomach clench, familiar memories of the children of his own orphanage flipping through his mind. Sasaki smiled. Those children bullied him. They beat him, cut him, starved him. But then, as he grew older, the other children did too, and they matured. They didn't see a reason to continue their violence, so they abandoned him, just as the headmaster had done. Sasaki huffed, a slight nostalgic look on his face. You'd think the boy would find it in himself to forgive and forget, but no. This boy watched and he learned. Yes, the headmaster had left him to the cruelty of the wolves. But the wolves were the cruelty. This boy grew up and remembered his pain. He remembered his pain they dealt him, and he never forgave. So he thought a punishment has to be received for justice. Children are cruel. Children are cruel. Could the wind fucking stop? Children are cruel. Children are cruel. They want kindness in return for their hate. Sasaki met his gaze, holding it blankly. And the little boy realized perhaps he should include others. And that little boy realized that perhaps he should include others similarly treated the same opportunity to join him. Atsushi stared. The boy was him? He's from an orphanage, and that's his story. Is this why he kidnapped the children? What was he planning to do? So, Atsushi, how about it, Atsushi? Will you join me? Breaking eye contact, Atsushi swallowed harshly. His head still ached, the weakness of his illness still pulling at his body. I'm afraid I don't follow, Sasaki-san. Please, call me Dai. Atsushi nodded hesitantly. Dai? The man considered him before standing. Come on, let me show you. Come, let me show you. Cautiously pushing to his feet, Atsushi winced at the pain lacing through his temple, tapping a hand to the sticky blood that sat there. He stared at the redness on his fingers before quickly following the other man. He led the way deeper into the basement, the air feeling more musty as he walked. Atsushi frowned as quiet sniffling reached his ears. Searching the space before him, Atsushi tried to get his eyes to shift to see the darkness. They remained as they were, the darkness remaining mysterious. I hope you won't be too surprised, Dai commented. Atsushi pushed away the dread that curled in his stomach at his words. You kidnapped children. I'm not sure what else could surprise me. Yet, as Atsushi walked into the shadows, he felt his breath catch. The children were there, all of them that were missing. All of them that were missing. They all looked terrified. Some teary-eyed, others just sat in shock. Atsushi remembered that feeling. He experienced it for the majority of his life. 18 years of fear. The fear of not knowing what would come. The fear of not knowing what will happen to you. The fear of a pain to come, and the fear of no one coming to save you. Atsushi knew those feelings. Atsushi knew these feelings he saw in them, but he also saw the cautious hope they had upon seeing him, that perhaps they had a savior. A slight metallic tang hit his throat. Atsushi frowned, searching the children. Almost all of them had a stain of red on their side. Dai stepped closer, to a kid closest to him. The boy tensed, but he didn't look away, like the other children. A hard, determined look in his eyes. The boy tensed, but he didn't look away like the other children. A hard determination in his eyes. Atsushi took in his dark red hair and blue eyes, an odd familiarity touching his senses. Who is he? Then it clicked. The boy reminded him of the picture Dazai always kept. It was of Dazai himself, an older man. Blue-haired and dark. It was of Dazai himself and an older man, blue-eyed and dark-haired. The man was a bit older than Dazai and treated Dazai like a brother in the photo. Atsushi never asked who he was. Dai crouched at the kid's level, tugging at the boy's top. A mess of wires wrapped around his chest, 3 metal needles stabbing into his side, a small timer set upon it. Atsushi felt his eyes widen. He rigged them all with bombs. Dai sat there. Dai was watching him, a curious look on his face. He stood, nudging the boy back with the other children. So, you see now, Atsushi? He smiled softly. These children are raised and they hate freely without punishment. This is my punishment to them. You understand me, considering your past? Atsushi looked at him, heart racing. He's crazy. A vague He vaguely remembered something Kunikita had told him. What to do when dealing with someone who can't be reasoned with. Do as you're told. Atsushi smiled. I understand. He stepped away, trying to adopt an air of casualness. And I don't disagree. I dealt with the same growing up. My hair was like this because of the other children. Many of my scars from them too. He shrugged. So, I don't disagree. He looked up, meeting Dai's curious gaze. So, what do you want to do with them? Dai considered him for a moment longer before skipping along to stand beside him. Well, I'm planning to let them go. They'll return to their homes, the bombs each having a radius of approximately 10 meters. They'll be positioned such that there is enough explosive to destroy Shibuzawa. No. They are positioned in such a way that there's enough explosives to destroy Shibuya and all the children in it. Atsushi felt his breath pick up and forced himself to smile. I have to save the children. Chapter 11. Atsushi watched as Dai handed the final child a bread roll, shifting back against the wall behind him. His head still pulsed with pain. The cut on his temple finally stopped bleeding. Ability still isn't working properly. He clenched his jaw. Hopefully I won't have to use it. Tapping a hand to his bloody, messy hair, he grimaced at the stickiness. I can get a first aid kit if you want it. I can get a first aid kit to treat that if you want, Dai called. Atsushi looked up, meeting his gaze. He was about to agree when he stopped himself. Where is it? I can get it. Dai hummed. It's upstairs. I can get it. I'll get it. You're clearly still in pain. Atsushi nodded, mind churning. He'll leave. Maybe I can get the children to escape. He met Dai's gaze with a smile. If you could, thank you, Dai. Dai smiled softly. Don't mention it. Watching as the man walked towards the space and up the stairs, Atsushi waited until the door was shut behind him, leaving him in silence. Quickly turning to the children, Atsushi stood hurriedly approaching the children. They backed away from him in panic. Atsushi stopped. Taking in the fear on their faces, it reminded him of the same look the children had at his orphanage when they saw him. Under the smirks and under the hate, there was always fear. He swallowed away his agitation, carefully kneeling down to the ground. He raised his hands to them. I don't want to hurt you. He pushed a smile to his face, hoping it was comforting enough. Hoping it was more comforting than he felt. I just want to help. The children were quiet, staring at him fearfully. One of them, the one from before, with dark red hair and blue eyes, stepped forward. He paused, taking a calming breath. You were agreeing with him the whole time. You said you would help him. Atsushi shook his head, agitation increasing with the constant awareness of ticking time. I didn't say I disagree. I said I didn't disagree. I never agreed. He lifted the hem of his shirt, showing the boy the multiple scars there, the burns and the cuts. These are what I got from my orphanage. A couple were from the children, but the majority were not. He's wrong. The fault is not with the children. They grow up learning from adults around them. So the fault's with them. Atsushi left his shirt drop, raising his hand playsatingly. So, I'm here to help you. The boy stared at him in consideration. Atsushi shifted nervously. I'm with the detective agency too. The boy's blue eyes widened and a small smile finally pulled at his face. He nodded with resolve. his face set with determination, and stepped forwards, raising his top to show him the mess of wires around his abdomen. There's a 30-second timer once the bomb is set to go off. They're triggered by either him or if we take it off ourselves. He pointed to the needles in his side. They're sensitive to our heartbeats. Atsushi nodded, quickly processing the information. Okay, so thinking about Kita's teaching, which means there's two senses. Okay, so thinking about Kunikita's teaching, that means there has to be two triggers, one for the heart sensors and the other for dye. Kneeling forward, Atsushi carefully shifted the wires around, searching for the two triggers. He paused, staring at two small plastic boxes. The first part was wiring around the boy. The second connected to the wires that led to the needles. Atsushi pulled the second one out of the wires, prying open the crudely filled. Atsushi pulled out the second one of the wires, prying out the crudely fitted plastic box. The wires met him, a red, a blue, a green. Atsushi nodded. Okay, red. It's always red. Does anyone know if there's a wire cutter around here? The children shuffled, mildly surprised at being suddenly dressed. One of them nodded, getting to their feet and leaving his sight for a moment. Atsushi heard a slight clanging before the child returned and handed him the pair. He smiled. Thank you. Returning to the wires, Atsushi carefully cut the red one, Returning to the wires, Atsushi carefully put the red between the blades. He hesitated. You don't have time to stop. Atsushi cut the wire. The timer flashed at him, the breath in his lungs catching before it settled and returned to a blank screen that it was before. Atsushi sighed. Okay, we can get this off of you now. He carefully took the needles out of the boy's side and helped the boy out of the mechanism. So, there we are. What's your name? The boy smiled. Sakuro? Well, Sakuro-kun, I'm going to need your help to do this as quickly as we can before Dai gets back. The boy nodded seriously. You saw those two boxes, correct? Again, Sakuro nods. You saw the one I chose connected to the needles? Yes. I need you to find that box and take off the lid. Do that and we can save everyone. Yes, sir. Atsushi smiled, gesturing for the next child. Sakura quickly hurrying to another and searching the wiring. Double-checking his wires, Atsushi cut the next one. I can do this. I can save the children. Atsushi cut the Atsushi cut the red wire. A slight dizziness reached. Atsushi cut the red wire. Atsushi cut the red wire. A slight dizziness touching in his senses. He smiled, gritting his teeth as it passed. He was only halfway through the children. He was only halfway through the number of children, the other half waiting quietly. Sakura had been efficiently finding the red wire and speeding things up. A couple of the other children doing the same. Dai had yet to return. Atsushi was getting nervous. When will the others get here? Atsushi-san? Sakura called. He was looking past him to the door. He's coming back. Shit. Atsushi hurried to his feet, picking up the collection of bombs he'd taken from the children. Sakura, take this. This is a stupid idea. He handed the boy the wire cutters, looking at him in the eye. But it's my only choice. You know what you're looking for. I need you to continue for me. Cut the red wire, but don't take any of them off until we get another opportunity. Always cut the red wire, okay? Sakato's eyes went wide, the blood draining from his face. Atsushi pushed the tool into his hand, holding him by his shoulder. I need to save you all. I want to do this, but I need your help. Can you do it, Sakato-kun? The boy's breathing picked up, eyes darting in panic. Sakato-kun? Atsushi repeated, hearing soft sounds of footsteps approaching the basement. The boy's resolve hardened. He nodded. Atsushi smiled, shooting to his feet. He glanced around the space, spotting a dark corner beside the collection of cups. Running over, Atsushi shoved the bombs into the gap before sprinting back to his previous position, leaning against the wall. He shut his eyes, forcing his breath to slow. The door clicked open. Atsushi slowly peeled his eyes open, lifting his head from the wall behind him. "Die, Atsushi," the man greeted. He walked in, carrying a small staircase. He walked down the small staircase with a red box in hand and a bag in the other. "I brought some food as well." Atsushi hated the sudden guilt that turned in his stomach. Why is he being kind to me? How can he be like this but do something so horrible? "How's your head?" Dai asked, holding him the red box. Atsushi shrugged. "It's okay, a bit painful still." Dai winced. "Sorry about that, I didn't know how else to get to talk to you." Atsushi waved a hand dismissively. "It's okay." Opening the box, he picked out a couple of antiseptic wipes, ripping them open and started to wipe the dried blood from his face. Dai again sat opposite to him. There was a frown on his face as he considered him. Atsushi, you work for the Armed Detective Agency, don't you have an ability?" Atsushi, you work for the Armed Detective Agency, don't you have an ability?" Atsushi looked at him as Dai continued. "I heard you could heal." Atsushi nodded. "I usually can, but it's not working properly right now. I need to find an opportunity to get the children out." He glanced to his left, meeting Sakato's gaze. The boy nodded at him, placing the wire cutters on one of the cupboards around the space. "He's finished." Dai nodded. "Do you know why?" Atsushi sighed. "Illness, I think. It makes my ability go strange." Dai nodded. Dai hummed. "Well, if you're ill, it's good to eat. It's good to eat to get better quickly." The man rummaged through his bag for a moment, pulling out a juice bottle and a summon onigiri. He knelt forward. "Here." Atsushi smiled, moving to take the items. He paused, Dazai's voice sounding in his head. "Sometimes, if you can't find an opportunity, make one." "Atsushi?" Dai frowned. Meeting his gaze, Atsushi shifted into action. Carefully taking the items before springing... Meeting his gaze, Atsushi shifted into action, carefully taking the items before swinging his fist around and slamming into Dai's temple. The man crumpled to the ground, eyes rolling up to his head. Atsushi shot to his feet, hurrying over to the children. "Anyone who still has the bombs on, take them off now. Anyone who still has the bombs on, take them off and give them to me, quickly, now." There was a rush of movement as they hurried to do it as he said. The remaining devices being handed to him. He nodded, looking them over. "Now, I need to get out of here. Here." He pulled out his wallet from his pocket. Atsushi handed them the spare room card he was given. "Take this and go into the room under the number it says. Do not let anyone else in. Am I understood?" "Yes, sir." No, that's not right. "Yes, sir," they all chorused. Good. Atsushi looked around Atsushi looked around for Sakato, frowning when he couldn't see him. Instead, he handed the card to the girl closest to him. I'll be staying here to make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else. Now, go. Stay together, all of you. The children nodded, moving to hold each other's hands as they hurried to the staircase. The children nodded, moving to hold each other's hands as they hurried to the staircase. The girl in front turning to make sure the others were with her. She glanced at Atsushi hesitantly, smiling when he nodded at her encouragingly. She turned, leaving the room with the others. Again, Atsushi was left in silence. Picking up the remaining bombs, Atsushi collected them together and hid them with the others. I wonder where Sakato went. He must be with them. Atsushi-san? Whipping around, Atsushi stared at the small boy before him. Sakato-kun? Why are you still here? You shouldn't be here. Sakato shifted on his feet nervously. I don't want to go back. Atsushi knelt before him, holding his Atsushi knelt before him, holding him by the shoulders. It's dangerous here. I want to protect you. If you go now, you might be able to catch up with the others. No! Sakato pushed away his arms before running to him. Sakato pushed away his arms before running into him, arms wrapping tightly around Atsushi's body. No, Sakato paused. Sakato paused, pushing his arms away before running into him, arms wrapping around tightly. Sakato pushed away his arms before running into him, arms wrapping tightly around his body. Atsushi froze in shock. I don't want to go back there. I don't want to go back there. Please, Atsushi-san. Atsushi frowned. Atsushi swallowed, forcing himself into motion. He carefully cuddled the boy back. Go back where? To the orphanage. What? Please, they aren't nice to me. It hurts. Sakato was shaking, his hot tears dripping onto Atsushi's shirt. Atsushi nodded, realization hitting him. He's the orphan that wasn't reported. Okay, I won't let you go back there. I promise you that. I'll keep you safe. I won't let you live the life I have. A soft groan sounded behind them. Atsushi's breath caught. He quickly pushed Sakato away, the boy stumbling slightly at the action. Go! Atsushi whispered harshly. Hide! Sakato stared, eyes wide, before sprinting further into the basement. After a moment, Atsushi lost sight of him as he hid behind a cupboard. In a cupboard tucked away behind a row of pipes. Atsushi spun back around, looking at Dai. The man grimaced, pulling his eyes open. Atsushi was just about to punch him again when Dai looked up at him, confusion on his face. Atsushi faltered. Atsushi? Choosing not to reply, Atsushi watched as the man pushed to a sitting position, looking around the empty basement. Where are the children? I need to buy time. Atsushi swallowed. I let them go. Dai's gaze whipped around to meet his. What? I let them go, Atsushi repeated. The other's eyes went hard. Why? Atsushi felt panic rising in his chest. Why? He shook his head. Tell him the truth. Because it's not the children who deserve punishment. He sighed. It's the adults. It's the adults who raise them to be like that. I don't think like that, right? Dai said to him, all my work. Look, Atsushi crouched down to his level. It's the adults. They were the ones who were cruel to the children. They didn't love them. They didn't give them enough attention. They didn't give them the attention they needed or the care they want. The children were left to themselves, so they work for their attention by... The children were left to themselves, so they work for attention... The children were left to themselves, so they work for the attention themselves by doing cruel things. The adults don't care to stop them. Atsushi clenched his jaw. Don't you see? It's not the children that deserve punishment. They're the victims themselves. It's the people like the headmaster that deserve it. Atsushi blinked, mind suddenly clearing. What are you saying? Dai said to him, considering him. I see. You do? Of course, you're like me. I need to understand different perspectives of course, you're like me. I need to understand perspectives of others to do the right thing. My past is twisted by my own experiences. Yours with yours. But you've pointed out the common factor. I agree. Atsushi sighed, an odd kind of relief filling his chest. He glanced over to the cupboard Sakuto was hiding in, searching the cupboard for any sign of him. The cupboard door wavered slightly. So, Dai started, will you help me? I'm sorry? Would you help me do this correctly? Punish the adults that wronged us? Atsushi frowned. He hated the well of want in his chest. He wanted to help Dai punish the people who wronged them, and those who wronged others like him. He felt anger and hurt curl into his chest, and Atsushi knew he wouldn't punish. He'd kill. He'd make them pay by pain and then with their lives, and it scared him, because Atsushi knew he'd enjoy it, and he wouldn't stop. Killing would become a joy. Atsushi knew himself more than he wanted to. He knew what he could do, and knew he knew what he could do, and he knew he had to do it. He knew what he could do, and he knew he had the will to do it if he chose to. But he didn't, and hoped he never would. He was with the agency now, and Atsushi had always been one to value life. He nodded. I'll help you. Okay, everyone, that was part 4 of You're Not Like Them by Luffy Gear 5, chapters 10 and 11. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know I did. Next part is going to be the last part of the series, chapters 12 and the epilogue. So I can't wait to see you, and until next time, take care of yourself. Eat.